A U.S. counterterrorism official issues a warning. Days later, a horrific mass shooting rocks the Western world, and somehow the conversation still isn't about prevention. It's about stopping enforcement. Actually, someone actually blames President Trump for all of this. Why would anyone want to stop ICE raids at this point in time? Who would be finding these threats if enforcement is shut down? Do you know how many they have now told us are here? And why, after what just happened at Bondi Beach, does anyone still pretend this danger isn't real? Stay with me on this one, because the dots and how they connect matter. Because as we go through this story, there is more questions than answers, more threats than answers, and a very uncertain future, because the only question is, what's next and when? And that's the story I'll bring you in just a few seconds. Kash Patel's going to be having a rough day, huh? An update on the FBI response at Brown University. Now, these things are always in progress. Some critics are stating that Kash Patel is acting too quickly. We activated the FBI Cellular Analyst Survey team, and because of that, as a result, early this morning, FBI's Boston Safe Streets Task Force, with assistance from the U.S. Marshals, Coventry RIPD, detained a person of interest, and then we come to find out shortly thereafter this.
We will be releasing the person of interest who had been detained earlier today. And the Attorney General can speak a little bit about the rationale for that. But we want to...
What is the rationale? We don't know exactly yet. We just know that that person was not the suspect any longer. So now Kash Patel will have to answer to President Trump, who stated, I've been briefed on the shooting that took place at Brown University in Rhode Island. The FBI is on the scene. The suspect is in custody. Shortly thereafter, the Brown University police reversed their previous statement. The suspect is not in custody. Now questions abound. Chilling new details emerge about suspected Brown University mass shooter. A unique handgun laser light helped cops nail Brown University's possible mass shooter, who traveled more than 1,150 miles from Wisconsin to Rhode Island to carry out his deadly attack. A revolver and a small handgun equipped with a special laser light was found in a hotel room of a man now considered a person of interest in a horrific case, according to sources and CNN. So you found a man in a hotel room with a gun, with a laser sight, and no one's going to ask questions. I think there's still a lot more to this story, but there's a lot more to many stories, especially when Chris Murphy goes on the record and states this.
Not shocking, because over the last year, President Trump has been engaged in a dizzying campaign to increase violence in this country. He is restoring gun rights to felons and people who have lost their ability to buy guns. He eliminated the White House Office of Gun Violence Protection, and he has stopped funding mental health grants and community anti-gun violence grants.
So he was playing off the story that this suspect, the person of interest, was mentally ill as it was reported, so he jumped on the soundbite right away and, of course, blames Orange Man bad. Now, quickly, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, I hope you will. If you are subscribed, double check, make sure your bell is checked to all. Your comments, your shares are so appreciated. Those of you who've joined as members, I can't thank you enough. Those of you who've joined and moved over with me when I continue this podcast over at Restricted Republic, now 4 days a week, thank you so very much. I'm going to be continuing on today to many details of Bondi Beach that go into this story of what the West is ignoring. And they can't ignore. And there's a reason I'm putting that story at Restricted Republic today. I'd love you to join me there. And I also want to give a special thank you to the sponsor of this video, which is Noble Gold Investments. Have you been to JustusKnightGold.com? Because as we wrap up 2025, one thing's clear. Uncertainty isn't temporary. It's the world we live in now. Waiting for things to go back to normal isn't a plan. It's a gamble. That's why Noble Gold Investments helps Americans just like you protect what they've built with real gold and silver that holds value when everything else feels uncertain. So this holiday season, remember, the best gift you can give your family isn't under the tree, it's peace of mind. That's why you need to go to justusknightgold.com right now and get your free wealth protection kit today. This holiday season, when you open a qualified account with Noble Gold Investments, you'll receive 10 1-ounce commemorative silver holiday coins. I want you to take a look at them. These limited edition silver coins make thoughtful gifts for friends and family. I'm telling you, they're a unique addition to your own collection even. They're a joyful way to celebrate the season and invest in something real. Those are incredible, aren't they? Now remember, there's always risk to investing. No guarantees, but if anyone can see you through that risk, it's Noble Gold Investments, and it's why I need you to go to justusknightgold.com. And remember, with every qualified account, you can get your hands on 10 of these beautiful coins. I want you to go there today. I love you all. Now let's get back to this video. Other breaking news. 2 people have been found dead at the home of director and actor Rob Reiner. According to reports, it is Rob Reiner and his wife. Now, of course, again, you have to sit back on these reports because stories develop. Even people jumping out immediately saying Rob Reiner and his wife Michelle were killed by their son, according to people. But you need to let these stories develop before you jump to any conclusions, because you're not always told the truth now, are you? You remember the resignation, Chief Smith, who resigned in disgrace, and now we come to find out maybe why. Because the Oversight Committee put out this report, which shows that the crime statistics were, well, altered, according to whistleblowers who now feel comfortable coming out. Carjackings weren't 30%, they were 50%. Homicides, not 10%, how about 25? Burglaries, not 20, how about 40? Total crime, not 5, how about 15? Everything you're told isn't always true now, isn't it? Oversight Committee releases bombshell report revealing D.C. police chief deliberately manipulated crime data. Chief Smith pressured campaign against staff led to inaccurate crime data. Chief Smith punished and removed officers for reporting accurate crime numbers and fostered a toxic culture. D.C. crime statistics are still at risk of manipulation, but my favorite talking point is the one in the middle, where these same folks stated that President Trump's federal law enforcement surge in D.C. is effective. Why do they work so hard to hide the truth? Why do they work so hard to keep crime on our streets? Why do they give us warnings that we ignore? Why are so many unvetted individuals roaming our streets? President Trump coming out, again, we discussed yesterday, mourning the loss of 3 great American patriots in Syria, 2 soldiers and 1 civilian interpreter. This was an ISIS attack against the U.S., and we've come to find out now who the attacker was with more details. Syrian man who ambushed and killed 3 Americans was a government soldier. That's going to lead to a lot more issues, as President Trump will retaliate, but we're waiting for more on that story and more on this story. Did you hear that Ukraine has now offered to drop its NATO membership? But don't worry, they haven't dropped everything, because Zelensky's offered, even though he's offered to give up his NATO dreams, he has not budged on any territorial concessions. So we still have a lot more work to do here as they continue. And who's going out there right now? As Witkoff and Kushner head down to Berlin to try to get these peace talks done. Will it be done before the holidays? We can hope. But right now, it's not looking great, because one man continues to stand in the way, and that is little Zelensky. So we'll see. But now we got to move into the tougher story. Joe Kent calls immigrants the nation's top terrorism threat. A strong statement. This published on the Seattle Times. They actually did a good job in this article. So what I want you to do first is I want you to listen to Joe Kent's statements. And then we're going to discuss what these statements mean. They were made just before the Bondi Beach and Brown University incidents. I'm going to tell you what the impact is, my analysis, and why so many are ignoring these warnings.
However, we have a persistent threat from the individuals that were allowed into this country by the previous administration. The number one threat that we have right now, in my view, is the fact that we don't know who came into our country in the last 4 years of Biden's open borders. What we have identified is alarming, and I want to share that with you today. We just recently put out a warning of the heightened risk of terrorist attacks posed to the homeland by terrorists pretty much of all stripes, but in particular from ISIS and from Al-Qaeda. NCTC has been crunching the numbers and going through the sheer volume of known and suspected terrorists that are in the country that came in under the Biden administration. So far, NCTC has identified around 18,000 known and suspected terrorists that the Biden administration let come into our country. These are individuals who under normal circumstances would never be allowed to enter our country because of their ties to jihadi groups like ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Yet the Biden administration not only let them into the country, and in many cases facilitated their entry into the country, just like the entry of the Afghan terrorists who committed the terrorist attack here just before Thanksgiving, killing one of our National Guard members and wounding another. That Afghan was brought into the country as a group of over 100,000 Afghans who were brought here during the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. These individuals, despite what has been reported, were not vetted properly to come into the United States. The individual terrorist who committed the attack in D.C., he was vetted to serve as a soldier in Afghanistan. The Biden administration essentially used his tactical level vetting as a ruse to bring him here and to bring him into our communities, and we've seen the tragic results of that. Now, that Afghan, that attacker, that terrorist, is just one of 88,000. We've identified 2,000 of that group of 88,000 who have ties to terrorist organizations. We're working right now hand in hand with DHS and with the FBI to run down this 2,000, the Afghans who came here under Allies Welcome who have ties to terrorist organizations, and additionally the other 16,000 individuals with ties to terrorist organizations.
16,000 plus 2,000 they're searching for, testifying a total of 18,000 known and suspected terrorists who entered the U.S. on former President Joe Biden's watch are here, who under normal circumstances would never been allowed to come into our country. You can specify how that figure was reached, but just stated his agency was crunching the numbers. When you go to his agency, however, right now, under the National Terrorism Advisory System, there are no current advisories. I project that may be changing shortly. I hope it doesn't. I truly hope it doesn't, but there's a more important discussion to be had, and this will be the start of my next video, and I hope you remember this warning.
And let me say this in English so you can understand what I'm saying.
I have translation.
No, I know you have translation, but I just want to make sure you get it right. There will come a day that we will see far more radical extremists and terrorists coming out of Europe because of the lack of decision-making, trying to be politically correct.
Changes perspective, many understandably so, but we have to talk about something serious, and frankly something the political class would rather you not connect the dots on, and I don't discuss with you. A major warning from the U.S. counterterrorism official, a global rise in targeted violence, and then a horrific mass shooting at Bondi Beach in Australia that sends shockwaves across the Western world. And yet somehow, some people are still asking us to believe that immigration enforcement is the real problem. So let's slow it all down, because this absolutely matters. The Seattle Times just published an article reacting to the testimony from Joe Kent, director of the National Counterterrorism Center, where he stated that immigration vulnerabilities now represent the top terrorism threat facing the United States. Predictably, headlines focus less on the warning and more on the outrage, but here's what didn't get enough attention. This warning came just days before one of the most brutal attacks we've seen in the Western world this year. Bondi Beach. At a peaceful gathering near Bondi Beach in Sydney, a public celebration, families present, gunmen opens fire, killing innocent people and injuring many, many more. Authorities have officially classified it as a terrorist attack. There was chaos, screaming, panic, and one unarmed civilian tackled an attacker, likely saving many, many lives. This wasn't a war zone. This wasn't a military target. This was a Western city in broad daylight. And that's the point. That's where the question comes into play, and where the conversation gets uncomfortable, but necessary. Why, after events like this, would anyone in the Western world still argue that border enforcement and immigration raids should be scaled back or stopped? And more importantly, if not ICE, then who exactly is supposed to be finding these threats before they act? Joe Kent? He provided the warning. He didn't say what he said for shock value. He testified that intelligence agencies have identified thousands of known or suspected extremist-linked individuals who entered the United States during the previous administration and policy periods, and that their tracking and monitoring them is now a national security challenge. That's not politics, that's a threat assessment. Yet instead of addressing the substance, critics immediately tried to reframe the conversation as if enforcement itself is somehow immoral or unnecessary or worse, dangerous. But reality doesn't care about optics. So let me be very clear on this. ICE raids are not random. They are not about ethnicity. They are not about politics. They are one of the only mechanisms we have to locate individuals who are already flagged by intelligence or law enforcement databases and are here illegally. So again, the question stands. Who benefits from stopping those operations? Who benefits from enforcement paralysis? Because it certainly isn't the average citizen. What happened at Bondi Beach isn't isolated. Across Europe, Australia, North America, we're seeing a pattern. Targeted attacks against civilians, public gatherings, cultural events, and symbolic locations. These attackers don't need armies. They don't need tanks. They just need access, time, and opportunity. And when Western governments downplay threats, delay enforcement, or prioritize political sensitivity over public safety, those gaps get exploited. Every time. Here's the double standard that should concern everyone. And it's one that they don't want you to know or realize. When an intelligence official warns about vulnerabilities, he's accused of fear-mongering. When enforcement agencies act, they're accused of overreach. But when an attack happens, everyone suddenly asks, how could this happen? The answer is always the same. Warnings were ignored. How many times are warnings ignored? Security isn't about labels. It isn't about ideology. It's about winning. It is about winning an X argument. It's about identifying a threat before they reach a beach, a concert, a school, a subway. Stopping enforcement doesn't make danger disappear. It just makes it invisible until it's too late. The tragedy at Bondi Beach is a reminder that the threat facing West nations are real, evolving, and global. Ignoring intelligence warning doesn't make us compassionate. It makes us reckless. And dismantling enforcement tools without replacing them with something effective doesn't make us safer. It makes us vulnerable. So I ask you this, and you need to ask all your friends and family this. If ICE isn't allowed to do its job, or do this job, who should be doing it? Drop a one-word answer in the comments. I'm curious. And I hope if this video made you think, you'll hit like, you'll subscribe, you'll put a comment, you'll share it, because conversations like this matter before the next tragedy, not after. Stay informed, stay vigilant. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. Remember, Bondi Beach wasn't an accident. It was a warning ignored. And now we have a Western nation, a Jewish celebration, a targeted terror attack, 16 dead, children among them, a Holocaust survivor among them. It wasn't a failure of law enforcement. It was a failure of intelligence. So sad. And our thoughts and prayers are with those families. I love you all. Until next time, Godspeed and God bless. I'm going to go now kick into the full version of what I actually have to say, more in depth on the Bondi Beach incident. Be prepared. Get to restrictedrepublic.com if you're not there already. Justus Knight, signing out.